Morning, Springfield. James Clary sitting in for Nick Reed, the Nick Reed in the Morning Show here on KSGF 104.1 FM.com. If you want to get in on this conversation, we are having a fascinating conversation today about reining in the power of the federal government. Yesterday we talked about government overreach, the rise of the police state, and we have a young man with us today via Skype named Andrew Demeter. Andrew, you there, bro? You there, Andrew?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Cool, we can hear you great.
Excellent.
I gotta tell our listeners we haven't used Skype in the studio before. I'm going to bring them into the 21st century here. It sounds great. The audio is so superior to the microphone, even on the iPhone. So what kind of mic are you using there, bro?
It's actually an Electro-Voice RE20.
Oh, man. You're a tech geek, aren't you?
I guess you could say that.
But you got into filmmaking, and what we're going to do, Andrew's video has gone viral, and I want to play this video for the audience. I'm not going to even set it up, but I'll tell you is that this is my guest, Andrew Demeter, with Nancy Pelosi. Play the video.
The NSA's illegal and ubiquitous data collection.
Well, I do not. I have questions about the metadata collection that they were collecting, unless they had a reason to do so. So I was one who I didn't support Amash.
It's a perfect time for you to play this video because I'm out in my laundry room and my cat's about to take a nice little poop in the litter box.
The department and I have fought them for years, on the community, fought them for years on the wide swath that they have put out there.
You did vote for a bill to continue funding for the NSA, though.
Yeah, of course. I don't think we should not fund the National Security Agency. No, they do many things.
Isn't the NSA a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment?
No. Some of what they do should be subjected to scrutiny in some of the things, but they perform many other functions as well, and we hold them to a high order. And I've had my biggest fights here in the intelligence community with the director of the NSA, Hayden, when he was the director. I don't think he was on the level with us. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other things that are there that are good things that are necessary for us to have. But from 9/11 on, the Bush administration went too far on all of these things, and we have the correspondence back and forth to prove or to demonstrate that they were just doing the wrong thing.
Why do you support? Yes, sir.
So what was that like? That had to be quite a moment for you.
Yeah, it was definitely an experience that something that I've never been through before. Generally, I'm a pretty laid back, reserved guy, shy even, and it's just remarkable to do something like that. I think all too often the public thinks, you're talking about reining in the power of the federal government, and all too often, we as citizens and we as, these subjects of government, if you want to call it that, we think that government is this big behemoth. It's this big entity that nobody can, come to conquer or come in contact with, with representatives and stuff. There's always this line of command that you have to go through these secretaries. You can never actually reach the individuals themselves. But with something like this confrontation, it was really humbling almost that, you could actually get close to these people. They are, in fact, people. They're not these, superhuman powers that never make mistakes. So it was definitely humbling in that sense.
Yeah, I imagine. Tell our listeners, because I didn't really set this up. I know the story, but tell our listeners how you even came in that position.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention also that I don't think I'll ever get in quite that same position ever again.
No, not if Pelosi has anything to say about it, that's for sure.
Right.
But
Definitely. So basically, I went to Washington, D.C. because I had won a competition with C-SPAN, which is a TV network.
Sure.
Basically, it's not really public access. But anyway, most people know what C-SPAN is. Anyway, they do an annual competition called Student Cam that basically asks middle and high school students to make a documentary about anything of national importance. And mine was on GMOs, genetically modified organisms. But basically, I was one of the top 5 winners in that contest. And then because of that, C-SPAN flew everyone out to D.C. We got to do a little segment type thing on C-SPAN that later aired. And then meeting with Pelosi was also one of the later events on the agenda.
How many people, how many other kids were with you?
I believe there were 4.
I got you. And these were all winners of this contest?
Correct. Yeah, you see them in the video for anyone who has seen the video.
Right. What was, just real quick, we're going to go to a break here in a second, but what was your video about that you made?
Yeah, mine was on GMOs, genetically modified organisms, which is basically when science goes into food. An example would be a fish tomato, which they insert a gene from, say, an Alaskan salmon into a tomato to make it resistant to cold, thus increasing crop yield and supposedly sustenance.
Yeah, and we're going to get into GMOs a little bit because as a chef and someone who's interested in natural foods, I have strong opinions, as I know you do, and you've got a new video out about chocolate syrup. We're going to talk about that and a whole bunch more when we come back. I'm James Clary, sitting in for Nick Reed. We'll be right back. Morning, Springfield. James Clary sitting in for Nick Reed. We've got our friend Andrew Demeter. Am I saying that right, Andrew? Demeter?
Yeah, surprisingly, most people get it wrong. Thank you.
They're like Demeter, right? Yeah, it's Andrew Demeter who has become really well known. How many views did that YouTube video with you and Pelosi get?
I think in the first 24 hours it got like 250,000, and then as of now, which it's kind of stayed at for a while now, and it's been sort of stagnant. I think it's about 750,000. So
oh my gosh.
It was crazy because the day that I uploaded that, which was probably like a month after, because I had to wrestle with C-SPAN to get the footage, which is a whole story.
Yeah, which we want to talk about that next, definitely.
Yeah, but basically I uploaded it. I think it was like mid-afternoon or something. I saw it started getting some attention on Live Leak and some other sites, and then I went to bed, and then the next morning I woke up and it had that night it had maybe 20,000 views, and then the next morning it had 250,000, and being that my highest viewing video before that was 15,000 views, it was pretty surreal.
Wow. I mean, that is just absolutely amazing. So tell me about this C-SPAN story. I think is really interesting because most people, myself included, see C-SPAN as this completely objective news source, and they have the Republican line, the conservative line, the liberal line, whatever, and they supposedly objective, but you've experienced some things with C-SPAN that gave you some pause, correct?
Yeah, definitely. So like you said, I at one point as well thought that, C-SPAN was this objective, fair, unbiased news service, and I still think there are, segments of the C-SPAN population, if you will, that are that way. I actually met when I was in D.C. C-SPAN founder Brian Lamb.
Sure.
He was a very gracious host, and he was great speaking with. And actually, after the whole Pelosi confrontation transpired, my dad and I actually went back to the C-SPAN headquarters, the studios, where we had previously filmed that segment I was talking about. And Brian Lamb, again, the founder, was there. And he, before this was even on YouTube, because I didn't even post it on YouTube until I got home, but he was there. He had already heard of the incident, as some people like to perceive it. And he actually said, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he basically said, congratulations, that's real journalism. Wow. He didn't say thank you, but so that's what he said. Now contrast that with how I was dealt with another C-SPAN employee who I won't name or anything because I don't think he was up to anything nefarious. I don't want to use the line, but quote unquote, he was just doing his job.
Yeah.
So anyway, basically right after the confrontation, what you don't see on video, it was sort of just this awkward transitional phase, really. One of the contestants, who was one of the winners actually up there, the girl in the front row, she immediately after, I don't know if it was as a result or not, but she actually got like lightheaded and had to sit down for a second and get a drink of water. Again, whether or not that was me, I don't know.
Right.
But, so basically, as Pelosi's leaving, and of course she's the first to leave because, you know, after that happened, they probably put her in an underground bunker or something.
Oh, no doubt.
But so anyways, as we're walking outside, walking back to C-SPAN, or maybe it was the museum that we were going to, I'm not sure. But anyway, a C-SPAN employee came up to me, and curiously enough, probably because he saw me holding up the phone in Pelosi's face, he said, you know, oh, are you planning on posting that to YouTube? Because he knew I had a YouTube channel because the previous day I uploaded some video and he had seen it anyway.
Yeah.
So then he said, you know, were you planning on posting that to YouTube? And I said, at the time, not knowing that there would be a problem, I said, oh, well, you know, why do you care? Why does it really matter? In somewhat of a more respectful way.
Sure.
And then later I found out when eating lunch, I was looking through my phone because to people who don't know, I recorded half the confrontation on my phone. The other half is C-SPAN footage because they had a cameraman there. And so I was going through my phone at lunch and I went to play the video. And to my very much so dissatisfaction, I realized that it only recorded half the video due to my phone having insufficient memory.
Memory issues. Oh, Lord, yes.
Right.
I totally understand. So you only got half the video on your phone, which led you to ask C-SPAN for the footage. Is that what happened?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then when I got home back in Cleveland, I sent a nice email to I sent an email to some employee at C-SPAN, I can't remember who specifically it was, saying, you know, oh, I found this, or no, I didn't find anything, but no, you know, I was wondering if you could send me the footage that you took while at the Capitol. I didn't make any mention of the Pelosi thing specifically,
Right.
Because that wouldn't really be on my side of the argument. But anyways, I sent that email out, and then instead of the person that I sent it to responding, the guy who confronted me about, you know, oh, are you going to post this on YouTube? He sent me an email back in response, saying, you know, because I was not asking for the footage. I was asking for the email to the cameraman who took it.
Gotcha.
So I was being a little sneaky there, but anyway. So that individual responded, the guy who confronted me, saying, you know, oh, I can't give you this information per C-SPAN's, you know, policy or something like that. And he said it actually was part of our agreement with Pelosi's office not to record audio. He said we can record video, but we just couldn't record audio. But curiously enough, the C-SPAN cameraman there actually had this, like, you know, you're familiar with tech, this like shotgun microphone on the camera. So it's like, it would be one thing if you just had an internal mic recording, but to have this external mic, it's like, that's obviously wasn't the case. So eventually, after a war waged via email, as I called it in the press release I released, basically, I got the footage back. I had to send out to C-SPAN a USB drive for them to put the footage on. It was like 32 gigs. It's like they couldn't have compressed it or anything.
Yeah.
But then the first USB drive I sent out, it just magically got lost, apparently. So then I had to send another one, and finally I got the footage.
Oh, my goodness. That's an amazing story. And I want to talk a little bit more about their agreement with Nancy Pelosi. I you know, that... Just once again, it's about transparency, and we're talking to our guest, Andrew Demeter, whose YouTube video went viral after winning a contest for C-SPAN, and he had a little confrontation with Nancy Pelosi. And we're going to talk more after we do some news. We're going to take a quick break. I'm James Clary, sitting in for Nick Reed. We'll be right back. KSGF, James Clary sitting in for my friend Nick Reed, who's taking some time off. We have our guest via Skype, Andrew Demeter. How you doing, Andrew?
Yourself?
I'm good, man. Are you awake now? You've got...
A little bit.
Yeah. I know, it's the dawn of crack. Just imagine. Now, you're on Eastern time in Cleveland, is that right?
Yeah, so that's a blessing.
Yeah, at least you got an hour later. Yeah, I was up like 3.5 hours ago. But anyway, Andrew Demeter's YouTube video has gone viral. We're talking about his experience with at the nation's capital with Nancy Pelosi, and I find it interesting what you specifically asked Pelosi about and her voting to fund the NSA. And tell me, why did you choose that question?
Well, it was an interesting choice, actually, a coincidental one at that, because Peter Jaspers, who was the contestant before me to ask a question, because, well, I should premise it with this, that when we went to meet Pelosi, it wasn't just like we were all casually having a conversation and then I sort of just jumped in. Instead, it was more like she actually put herself into the position by saying, oh, if you have a question about your documentary that you made, feel free to ask me about it. So Peter's documentary was actually about the NSA, and he asked the question before me. I was the last person to ask a question.
Got it.
And then I, even though mine was on GMOs, I said, why do you support the NSA's illegal and ubiquitous data collection? And then it was funny to hear her response, basically just diffusing all responsibility to the Bush administration.
Oh my gosh, and there was so many ums and ahs. Well, we're going to talk more with Andrew Demeter in just a moment. First, we're going to find out what's going on in the Springfield scene with Mr. David Meese. What's up, Dave?
All right. Well, authorities in Greene County are trying to identify the masked man who held up a truck stop in Bodark. Investigators say the suspect was armed when he went into the Phillips 66 at the Hood's truck stop on Highway K. The clerk wasn't hurt. The suspect left in a gold or yellowish 2004 Ford Taurus. The vehicle didn't have any license plates, and detectives aren't sure which route he took. If you do have any information, you're asked to call 911. The new year will bring good news for thousands of cancer patients in Missouri. Life-saving oral chemotherapy treatments will be less expensive. New legislation that will become law effective January 1st will eliminate the co-payment cost difference between oral and intravenous chemo. Experts say a month of oral chemo can cost thousands of dollars, while intravenous treatments can be as low as a $20 copay. The Missouri Department of Correction says it set a new record for its Restorative Justice Garden program. 180 tons of fresh produce has been donated to local food pantries, shelters, churches, and school districts within the state. This is the third year in a row that the program set a record for donations. The first alert forecast from KTTS meteorologist Ted Keller. Mostly cloudy skies today, the high of 46. Tonight, a mix of light rain and snow, a low of 33. Tomorrow, maybe some light snow and the high of 36. That is the latest news and weather.
Thank you, Mr. Meese. Now you can go home and sleep. I'm James Clary, sitting in for Nick Reed. We're talking to our guest, Andrew Demeter. So the guy before you kind of set up the NSA issue, and so you asked Nancy Pelosi, and in the interview, if you guys watch it on YouTube, our listeners, she is just like and like you said, she basically deferred the responsibility of the Bush administration. What are your feelings on it?
Well, I think the ums and uhs can be attributed to basically just this fact, in my opinion, of politicians in general, that, they speak, what they say is changed depending on which audience they're in front of. An example of this, an analogy that I could make would be saying, say someone my age is trying to be this thug or something, for lack of better hobby, and he goes into a store and robs something, and then brings it back to his friend who's trying to initiate him into this thug group or something, and the kid who stole the thing says, hey, look, I stole this, look how awesome I am. And then contrast that with what he'd do if, say, a cop approached him and said, you just stole that from the store. Now his narrative changes, and it would be much different. He'd say, oh, no, I didn't do it, because he doesn't want to go to jail. So I think the same thing's true with Pelosi. Depending on who she talks to, her stance on the NSA changes, or her stance on any policy issue changes. When she doesn't have, her speechwriters or her prompters with her, then, she doesn't even know which side to take. So I think that uncertainty can basically be attributed to that she changes her narrative depending on who she's speaking to.
Yeah, and, we talked quite a bit on yesterday's show about the rise of the police state, government overreach, the NDAA. What's amazing to me is that, there are very few politicians in D.C. that support, for instance, the repeal of the portion of the NDAA that will allow a citizen to be detained without habeas corpus, without trial, ad nauseum. it's, as a 16-year-old, I want to know, it's so refreshing to hear a young person who actually has a grasp of these issues. It seems like on the show the other day we had a lot of callers, some that said, well, today's youth, they're not as involved. But how did you get politically savvy? Did you just read on the internet about what's going on?
Yeah, definitely part of it could be attributed to the internet. I mean, this technology now is historically unprecedented, right? I mean, just during the break you were saying, it's amazing that right now, we can be in different parts of the country and have this instantaneous high quality conversation.
Right.
I mean, it's incredible. If you think back, historically, imagine how much different, say, the Holocaust would be if they had this instantaneous technology. I mean, it would be game changing.
We could have changed the world without a doubt. Andrew, we're coming up on a hard break. We'll get more with Andrew Demeter, the NSA, the police state, and the rise of the power of the federal government, and what we can do, perhaps, to slow it down. I'm James Clary, sitting in for Nick Reed. We'll be right back. Morning, Springfield. James Clary sitting in for Nick Reed, in with our guest, Andrew Demeter. And I want to apologize to our listeners. We are having a few technical glitches, that we were just talking about technology, Andrew, and Skype, and I think we got a little background noise that's coming on. We're trying to work this out. Like I told you, Andrew, this is the first time we've used Skype at the studio, but we're getting it figured out. These audio freaks will figure it out. But you were saying that, you got your information. Are your parents politically active?
Not, extraordinarily. So, like I said, yeah, the internet's a key player in it. It's just amazing, this power we have now to decentralize not only the power of the federal government by communicating with each other, but also the power of mainstream media and the grasp that it has on us. And you were talking earlier about the youth of America being, apathetic, basically. Someone told you that. And over the summer, I actually did kick off this project. It's now sort of a scrapped project for the time being, and I don't know if it will ever, be revived. But it was called Politicast, and basically I was trying to crowdfund, funding basically for what I wanted to be the world's first, political news network run by teens. And, of course, it didn't get funding. It only reached about 4% of the funding, which is about $50,000. So understandable, people don't want to give their hard-earned money to some random teenager.
Right.
But that was the goal with that. I wanted to sort of immerse people in my age group into politics and into journalism, because there's a quote that goes something like, if you don't take an interest in politics, they'll take an interest in you. And I fear too much that, people my age, and understandably so to some extent, are more, interested in football and celebrity gossip than they are politics and these things that actually run the world, and it's really disheartening to see that happen.
Yeah.
And I feel like if now, at our age, we can sort of realize each other's differences and, have people from all sides of the political spectrum and viewpoints, I feel like that could be, game changing in the future, because we see all these political conflicts and religious wars and stuff like that happening, and I feel like those, call it a romanticized vision of the future, but I feel like those may, be able to be transcended by doing something like this and connecting people worldwide.
I think you're spot on. And I also don't agree with the assessment that America's youth is necessarily apathetic. I think your generation is better informed primarily because of the internet than a lot of for instance, GMO foods. When I first started my quest to get healthy, it was young people that said, hey, go watch this documentary Forks Over Knives, or go watch this Food Inc. And, so a lot of the information that I got was from people your age that turned me on to stuff that I had no clue about.
Yeah, I mean, just personally speaking, I guess, in the form of an anecdote, or from anecdotal data, from my perception in high school and everything, me and maybe a couple, 2-3 other people are, actually actively interested in this stuff. Sure, when, it becomes relevant or popular on Twitter to, tweet stuff about Ferguson or stuff like that, then everybody's in an uproar. But when it's not popular and, when you're losing your friends over it or some stuff like that, then, people want to sit down and shut up, and it doesn't matter. So while I do agree that I think we are definitely more informed, whether for better or for worse, it might be, an oversaturation of information almost. Yeah. From my experience, I don't see people actively, people my age actively participating in politics or, taking an interest in them.
They're not engaged, is what you're saying. Yeah. And, so how do we get your generation engaged? I think your idea, the Politicast, is a wonderful idea. And I wouldn't give up on that. Your 15 minutes, I don't think you're just stuck with 15 minutes of fame, kid. I mean, I found you on the internet because I'm always cruising political forums and libertarian blogs. Would you consider yourself a libertarian, by the way?
Yeah, that's what it says on my Wikipedia page, so it must be true. No.
Yeah, everything on Wikipedia is true. We know that, right? Yeah.
No, well, for the record, I do think that Wikipedia is demonized. People say, it's not a good source, but everything is actually cited. But anyway, yes, yeah. I would consider myself a libertarian, an adoptee of the non-aggression principle.
Mm-hmm.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I'm not a religious person, but I think the golden rule is a very good principle. But you're talking about how we can combat this apathy,
mm-hmm.
and I think, at least from my experience, I said this in the Politicast, Indiegogo campaign I had, which is, I think politics, I think media, or just politics in general, which media is definitely an influencer in, is it's intentionally confusing and esoteric. They use these intimidating buzzwords and
mm-hmm.
and all this confusing stuff, and I think that's a deterrent more than and engagement in the youth. They see these things as, they're so dry, why would anybody care about this? And I think it's just a method of control. It's just these politicians saying, you need a specialist, a specialized politician who has all this knowledge to, rule the country. Well, I don't really think so. I think we can actively participate in, our own future. We don't need these leaders in fancy suits and ties to, hold precedence over our lives.
And you mentioned the non-aggression principle. You mentioned Stefan Molyneux, and I would encourage my listeners to check out his videos. And I think Stefan considers himself an anarcho-capitalist. Is that
mm-hmm.
correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, and anarchism. I was talking earlier before we had you on how I was raised in a liberal family. I opened a business, became a Republican, and my views have really metamorphosized into more of a libertarian viewpoint and almost to anarchy. And when you say anarchy,
such a scary word.
Oh, I know. People see Molotov cocktail throwing
mm-hmm.
crazies out on the street, and anarchy is really anything but that. It's just the lack of rule. But we're going to talk more with our guest, Andrew Demeter. If you want to get in on this, we are going to take a couple phone calls. If you have a question for Andrew, who combated with Miss Pelosi in the halls of Congress, the hallowed halls, give us a call, 417-447-5743 or 1-800-630-5743. I'm James Clary. We'll be right back. Morning, Springfield. James Clary sitting in for Nick Reed. Give us a call, 417-447-5743. We're talking with Andrew Demeter, the young man whose video has gone viral. It's almost got, we're 3/4 of the way to 1 million views, where he, what's crazy about this, Andrew? You just asked what I think is a very common sense question. Miss Pelosi, mm-hmm. why do you support the funding of the NSA when they have this, I think your term was ubiquitous, just enormous overreach in the metadata collection of all of our emails, all of our phone calls, and she couldn't answer. I mean, she just
mm-hmm.
So I think so many people are not even aware of the NSA data collection.
Yeah, and obviously that's a problem. Another part of the youth being apathetic, sort of. They just you tell them these facts and they really don't care. It's an argument that I've used in the past. I saw this man on the street video before by Adam Kokesh. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I've tried to get Adam on the show. I think he's going to come on eventually. He's a good guy.
Yeah. He just released a book too, which is great. But anyway, he did a man on the street video once I think it was in front of the White House actually, and he went up to people, sort of assuming the role of the NSA, and he said, "Hey, can I see your phone for a second?" And most people would just hand it over, and then he'd say, "Oh, what's your passcode? Can I read your text and stuff?" And they'd, of course, back away and not want him to do that anymore. But then contrast that when it's happening in real life and you actually see what's going on with what happens when, you have the blinders on and this is happening every day. Just because it's invisible doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So the argument that I've used in the past is, people say, oh, well, why do you care about the NSA spying on you if you have nothing to hide?
Yeah.
Well, firstly, I think it was Ben Franklin who said a man willing to trade liberty for security is deserving of neither. But not only that, also, if you have nothing to hide, then why are you afraid of relinquishing your privacy? Well, according to that logic, why do people put up no trespassing signs? Why do you wear clothes? Why do you have a passcode on your phone? Give me your password right now, James, and let me go through your email and text. Just because you don't have anything to hide doesn't mean you should relinquish your privacy and liberty.
No, and as we know, it's a slippery slope. When the Patriot Act was passed, and then the NDA, I think it was in 11. Well, I'm not even sure what first year where they added some of those provisions that really take away our personal liberties. It just gets more and more. In this facility that the NSA has built in Utah, and you're kind of a tech geek, what do you know about the amount of data that the NSA is able to collect?
Oh man, I couldn't even estimate it. I'm sure there's so much that a word hasn't even been invented for it yet. But something interesting that I do know about that facility in Utah is that there's a grassroots initiative right now, and I think it's gaining traction, and rightfully so, that basically the NSA, because there's such this heat created from all of the computers and data collection devices they have, they need all this water. To cool it. So basically, right now there's some bill they're trying to propose or something where Utah would stop giving water somehow to the NSA, and thus its programs would be defeated, which I think is a very noble cause. So that is something that I do know about it.
Yeah, and I've read that as well, that they're trying to deny the federal government and the NSA the water rights. And like you said, they use an enormous amount of water just to keep their machines cool. I read something, I can't remember what it was, but I mean, it was a crazy number. Like, they have enough data that if you made a video going back to the time the universe was created to now, they could store that. I mean, it's just,
wow.
It's ridiculous. And what do they need that for? Well, they say it's in the interest of national security to protect us. But I think you're a believer like I am. We don't need a nanny state.
Yeah, like a nanny state that, brings back visions of Bloomberg trying to, ban soda and all this other ridiculous things. I mean, it's just absolutely crazy that, people try to impose this control upon us. Why do you need to do this? It's just for their own personal power and gain. And it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it really is. We're talking with Andrew Demeter, our friend from Cleveland, who is a YouTube sensation. He's a 16-year-old. He's politically engaged, and he's a libertarian, and we love it. We're going to do some news with Mr. Misi, and we'll be right back with our guest, Andrew Demeter.
Police in Joplin are investigating several people for stealing mail and packages from the Arbor Hills and Westbury Square area. They're reminding folks to keep an eye on deliveries and mail with tips, such as don't send cash in the mail, and if you're headed out of town, call your post office to have your mail held. You can find more tips at our website at ksgf.com. A new year will bring a new law that will make oral chemotherapy treatments for cancer patients much cheaper. The new legislation that will become law January 1st will eliminate the copay cost difference between oral and intravenously treatments. Experts say the month of oral chemo can cost thousands, while intravenous can be as low as a $20 copay. Staples is the most recent retailer to announce a cyber attack. The office supply company says a security breach may have affected 1.2 million customers at numerous stores across the country, including the one here in Springfield. And that's the latest news.
Let's check traffic. KSGF, News Talk Radio 104.1 FM. I'm James Clary, sitting in for my friend Nick Reed, who's taking some time off. We've got our guest, Andrew Demeter, is on the phone from Cleveland, actually on Skype from Cleveland, and that's why if you hear there's a little background noise we hear occasionally, but we're trying this Skype connection. I'll tell you, the audio is a lot better. So, Andrew, we've been talking about everything, about your attempt to get teens involved through something called Politicast. It was going to be an all-teen, what would you call it? A political news network, all-teen news network. And, I know that your generation's really into technology and, into video and audio. I think maybe, just even grabbing some people. I know my sons, gosh, they could do stuff with video cameras when they were 10 that I had no idea, and computers. You're very technologically savvy, your generation.
Yeah, and that's basically why I had this idea. I wanted to capitalize and harness this power, like we were mentioning earlier, this historically unprecedented power that we have, because we see, even if teens aren't able to participate themselves in creating content for the network, I think there's a statistic like the average American teen spends 7.5 hours each day consuming social media.
Wow.
So if we could definitely, harness that power and get this message out there to the youth and, package everything in an engaging style. And I was also thinking, involving pop culture to some extent with it, artwork and music that would engage the youth. And obviously, our goal initially was to build a news studio, and to basically, have anyone participate who wanted to. But not only that, we'd also, send video equipment and the required materials, unless people just could really use their phone, who were living, out of the U.S. and internationally. Because, when I pitched this idea and my mom heard of it, she said, that's such a great idea. How many Americans, let alone American teens, know what, say, a Palestinian kid is thinking about, like, the politics of the world. I mean, it's crazy. You just don't hear this stuff. And because we're the literal future of the country, you would think that our opinions would matter. But at the end of the day, though, I did say, if this project did fail before it did, I said it's really just a matter of the free market at work, because if the project succeeds and it gets funded, then that means that our opinions matter and they're important to the market and people want to hear them. But, as brutally truthful as it might be, if it doesn't get funded, it simply means that right now in the market there's not a need or a want for this type of platform.
Right, and you're completely free market guy, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, I had a thought, it's like, well, could you get Rupert Murdoch or someone like that to fund? That's the last thing you want.
Exactly. That's one of the main important parts of this too, because we do want funding, we also want to be independent and not have to sort of, censor ourselves or submit to a certain agenda, because as we see in the American media right now that's so consolidated and corporatized, there's like 5 corporations that own the entire media landscape. That's obviously an issue, and that's something that we want to address, not perpetuate.
And I want to ask you about a comment that you made online about Fox. Our listeners, I would say, primarily are conservative, and I know a lot of it, we're a Fox affiliate, but we're talking the Fox television network, and you had some interesting things to say about the bias that goes on both with like MSNBC and Fox. What was your say? You were on Neil Cavuto's show, is that right?
Correct. Right.
Wow. Tell me about that, but then come back to this idea of the paradigm and the particular thought processes on the two opposing networks, the two main opposing. How was your interview with Cavuto? He seems like a cool guy.
Yeah, I'll address the latter question first.
Okay.
Because I think that's more important than just, my personal experience with Cavuto. But anyway, so as far as the paradigm and, the certain viewpoints of the media, while I do identify with a conservative standpoint, I just found it really interesting and not unpredictable, though, that, because after the whole Pelosi thing, I released this press release saying, basically running down everything that happened and my thoughts on it. And when I was writing that, as soon as I was done writing it, basically, I thought to myself, let's see what's going to happen here, because Pelosi is a Democrat. She's a liberal. So I guarantee you, I'm not going to be asked by MSNBC or CNN to do an interview because they're liberal-leaning outlets. And instead, I figured it would be Fox and, any other conservative station out there, which I really can't think of any others. I'm sure there's one or two. So that was my prediction from the outset, and sure enough, that was exactly the case. MSNBC, CNN, no emails or phone calls or anything, but Fox, I think it was like the day after I released the video, they called me up, sent me an email and everything, and I found that interesting because it's not necessarily that they agree with my viewpoint that the NSA is, illegal and ubiquitous in its data collection, a violation of the Fourth Amendment, but instead they just wanted to get me on, in my opinion, and not that I didn't enjoy the spotlight, but they just wanted to get me on to bash Pelosi, bash her liberal agenda, and they sort of just used me as a conduit to, actualize their agenda.
And we have you told me that you were going to interview James Corbett, and James Corbett is the first show that I did here, we interviewed James Corbett, and he did a video. Oh gosh, I can't remember the name, but it's basically about the left-right paradigm that is used as a control issue, and that we're kept in the enslavement that we're kept by the government because we divide along these lines of conservative and liberal, and by doing that, the population is split down the line, pretty much 50-50, and we never get control because of that split.
Exactly, divide and conquer, it's easier, biologically or evolutionarily, I guess, when you're in a big group of people, you obviously have more power. You have more of a better probability to win, and that's exactly the case. That's why people want to try to divide and get the most people on their side. And it's the same thing. I think that I'm sure you heard of the story recently when Michelle Obama came out and said, someone asked me for help at a Target store to reach something on the shelf for them. Therefore, they're racist. They're discriminating against me because I'm African American. No, not to discredit at all the very legitimate threat of racism and how it exists. But for her to say that, it's just basically perpetuating this racism. In an interview with Morgan Freeman once, someone asked him, how do we stop this issue of racism? And he said, stop talking about it. By talking about it, you're continuing to perpetuate these problems. So again, not to belittle the very real issue of racism, but for her to say, it's the equivalent of, me going into a store wearing, a fancy clothes or something, and someone mistaking me as an employee and saying, where's the bread aisle? It's like I'm not just going to say, you're obviously discriminating me because I'm white or anything. Yeah,
believe me, bro. As a guy who wears a chef coat half the time, I get stopped all the time.
I'm sure.
Stores. We're talking to Andrew Demeter, YouTube sensation and political pundit. I'm James Clary, sitting in for Nick Reed. We'll be right back.
It would bring me to life. I could only imagine.
James Clary, sitting in for my friend Nick Reed, KSGF News Talk Radio. We're talking with Andrew Demeter, YouTube sensation. We had a caller ask where they can find your video. I found it very easily by Googling or searching on YouTube. I just did Pelosi and Demeter, and your last name is spelled Demeter for our listeners, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
and you could also go to just generally, if you want to see some of my other video reports and stuff, which don't have nearly as many views. You could just go to youtube.com/teentake, TEENTAKE.
Teen Take. And that, we're talking about Andrew has tried to get crowdsourced funding for an all-teen news network called Politicast. And Andrew, like I said, I don't give up on that deal. I think, people would really like to see not just teenagers, but you mentioned like a kid in Palestine. I mean, to me, that would be fascinating. What's going on in the rest of the world? And it would be so easy to do with today's technology.
Right. I think part of it, though, is, well, the majority or maybe the minority would agree with you on that. I think for a lot of people, they'd rather just, continue to believe what they want to believe and not actually see the truth for what it is. And what I mean by that is they'd rather stick with the American perspective of, American exceptionalism and all that type of deal instead of actually, considering the other opinions of people around the world.
Mm-hmm. Do you, you follow news and current events. What are your thoughts about our ongoing engagement in the Middle East, if you have it?
Yeah, as unfortunate as it is, I wish I was more well-versed than I am. But what I do know, it's just so disheartening to me to see this continued, strife in the Middle East, basically over territory, as is with most wars, and religion. Particularly with religion, it's just so, ironic that most religions, if not all, are supposed to preach, unity, love, and compassion, the golden rule, like I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But fact is, it's not what they do in practice, and that's not to demonize,
any
religious
religion.
people,
Oh, right.
But just the general premise of it that, it's just so ironic. And the other aspect, territory, and resources as well. It's ridiculous. I was writing about Bitcoin a while back and about, what is money actually. And the fact that people are willing to kill other human beings for a fancy piece of paper dyed green or whatever color it is,
or shiny metal. Yeah,
exactly. And they're willing to do that just to, get that currency. Of course, it's purchasing power, and I don't mean to demonize that. But also, you mentioned silver too. When I was researching Bitcoin more and asking myself, what actually is money, that came up too. Why does gold have worth? At the end of the day, gold is not valuable to he who starves. The man who starves would rather have food than gold.
Right.
And basically what it boils down to is all value is subjective, and beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you know what? An amazing fact that I didn't know until recently is that the petrodollar really has a lot to do with these wars in the Middle East. And Saddam Hussein, the petrodollar basically is an agreement between the United States and OPEC that all trading in oil would be done with the U.S. dollar. Well, Saddam Hussein decided that he was going to use the euro, and he announced it. And the other person was Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, who said he was going away from the petrodollar. And isn't it interesting that within, I think it was 6 months of Hussein announcing that, we go to war with Iraq, we go to war with Libya, or support the people that overthrew Gaddafi. And from what I've read, and I'll tell you, Andrew, check out a video that James Corbett did on the state of Libya. It's hell. Right now, it is hell. And we supported these trumped-up dictators for years until they said we're getting away with the petrodollar.
Yeah, it's definitely all about the petrodollar. I covered a story this past summer about, coincidentally, Bitcoin as well, and how in Kuwait, I believe, they were saying that the government was saying, or something like this, they said, we're going to use, or no, this is what it was. I think ISIS was said to, they were going to start funding their terrorism with Bitcoin, but that came out of U.S. media. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So ISIS, according to the U.S., is going to fund their terrorism with Bitcoin, but coincidentally, at the same time, Kuwait was saying that they were going to trade oil not for the fiat currency, the U.S. dollar, and instead some other currency that I can't recall.
Right.
But so it's just crazy, the U.S. is trying to demonize demonize ISIS as using, Bitcoin when the Kuwait, I think it was, maybe they were trying to trade oil for Bitcoin instead of the U.S. dollar or something like that. I can't remember specifically. The video's on youtube.com/teentake, but yeah, I mean, it's crazy just this demonization that goes on. And of course with Bitcoin too, of course, U.S. dollars aren't used to fund terrorism, but when Bitcoin does it, obviously then everyone, it's a problem.
Well, our government does everything that it can do to protect the powers that be. And we are I think you're a believer that really we live in a state of corporatism. The corporations, the large banks, financial institutions run this country. We were talking earlier with Eric Burleson about, the state convention, and just people are really, they're really frustrated. And I know you get this, Andrew, and I think a lot of people just feel a complete lack of power and just hopelessness almost.
Yeah, if you're not frustrated, I don't think you're paying attention. That's a simple fact, because I mean, if you really look into this stuff and not just watch the mainstream corporate media, you'll really get you'll really get a picture painted of the actuality. So I think that's that.
Yeah, and it's sad. We've got a few minutes left with our guest Andrew Demeter. We're gonna hopefully come up with maybe some solutions and maybe some ideas what people can do to take some power back. I'm James Clary, sitting in for Nick Reed. We'll be right back.
You're listening to KSGF Mornings with Nick Reed on 104.1 KSGF, Springfield's News Talk FM.
Morning, Springfield. I'm James Clary, sitting in for Nick Reed. We're talking to Andrew Demeter, YouTube sensation, who's had over 700,000 views. If you go to youtube.com/teentake, that's TEENTAKE, Teen Take, you can see all of Andrew's videos, and I encourage my listeners to check out his site. Now, do you have a website as well, Andrew?
I do have a website. It's just andrewdemeter.com, DEMETER.
Gotcha.
But that basically just redirects you to my YouTube page. So not yet,
right.
Professionally designed one or anything, but hopefully that'll be in the works soon.
Sure. And, let's talk a little bit about what your plans for the future. I know you've told me off air you want to stay in film, journalism, video, audio, some form, but you're really into politics too, right?
Yeah, so hopefully I can fuse those different interests together into something, or at least, pursue one of them. But I just feel like, being actively engaged in the writing of our history is just really empowering to me, and being a journalist, trying to connect with other people on a very personal level, and hear these stories and diverse experiences from all different types of people, I think is not only humbling but also enlightening.
Yeah, and you really have had some amazing experiences as a young man. I mean, gosh, thinking back to when I was 16, you've been on Neil Cavuto's show on Fox Network, you've met Nancy Pelosi, C-SPAN. You've done all this stuff. Have you been able to travel much outside of the states? Have you been out of the country yet?
Yes, I have. But before I go on to that, it is worth noting that all that comes at the expense of a social life.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah.
But no, I have. I did over the summer as well. Travel to Canada, Toronto actually, to attend an economic conference at the Mises Institute up there, which is all about free market and libertarianism as well. And while I was up there, that was a blast. It was like a 3-day symposium, I believe, on economics and Mises and everything. And while I was up there, I actually got to interview 2 individuals. As well, I also got to meet Dan Dix of Press for Truth. Don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yes, absolutely.
So the 2 interviews that I did up there were one with Walter Block, who's a free market economist and a professor at Loyola University, I believe, and then also Doug French, who is good friends with Jeffrey Tucker, if you know him, and also he used to be actually a student of Murray Rothbard. So those were 2 interesting personas I got to meet up there and interview.
Yeah, and you're a free market libertarian. For our listeners, explain, why do you support libertarianism, and particularly in regards to capitalistic and free markets?
Well, just is a basis of my philosophy. It's just, freedom.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be one of those people who are just like, America, yeah. But freedom, it's so important to everyone. I just can't, just from being, a kid at grade school, you sort of have that like inner rebellion in you, I guess. But it's not just, heated rebellion. It's definitely with purpose. Like, at my grade school, as ridiculous as it might sound, it would have sounded like the segregationist era or something like that if I didn't preface it or give it context. But at my grade school, the lunch tables were basically segregated by gender. As ridiculous as that
really
is, there would be, there was like two tables per like homeroom class, and then one would be a boys' table, one would be a girls' table. So yeah, that was when things started, I guess. But just just trivial laws and stuff like that, jaywalking, running red lights, speeding. It's like, obviously that stuff is bad if it causes harm or puts people in danger. But, if nothing happens like after the fact, then I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Now, that's not to say you should go, speed and run red lights. But just trivial little things like that just really annoy me and just sort of stoke this passion to fight for freedom.
But people take this stuff for granted. There's all these rules and regulations. They never even give it any thought that why do we have these? And, what is the ultimate purpose of all these regulations? And are we indeed free? And I think you would agree that we're not free. And what can we do as Americans? We talked to Eric Burleson earlier about the state convention, but what do you plan to do personally, and what do you encourage others your age and the rest of the population do to get these freedoms back?
Well, personally, I hope to, in the near future, when school stops consuming my life, to begin making more videos on Teen Take and hopefully more documentaries, upping the professional quality and making them more accessible and easily digestible, not, diseasing them with this bureaucratic language and stuff that nobody understands, because at the end of the day, it's all about the message. It's not, trying to, make yourself look good. It's about, preserving this message and, and disseminating it to other people. But as far as what other people can do, I'd say, your safest bet is to judge everything with a grain of salt. Don't, take my opinions as the truth. Don't take mainstream media's opinions as the truth. Judge things for yourself and, make logic-based decisions. Don't make these emotive reactions like, depending on whatever anyone's stance is on 9/11, don't just like make these emotive reactions, or even with gun control too. After Sandy Hook, everyone's ban guns. It's like that's the emotive reaction. Yes, I get that, but then is banning guns actually going to stop them? No, there's straw purchases. No, people who are criminals do illegal things. They disobey the law. So just
educate yourself, right?
Educate yourself. Make logic-based decisions, and don't take anyone's word as just the truth infallibly.
Yeah, and I think that is so important. There's so much great information out there, and you've mentioned a lot of sites and a lot of names. I mean, people, they need to do their research.
Exactly.
The mainstream, I don't turn the television on anymore unless I'm watching a movie or something. I mean, the news is just so sanitized. I got to ask you a question. We just got a couple minutes left. Any thoughts about running for office?
Oh, man. I think I'd be a hypocrite if I were to do that. But
maybe in the Libertarian Party.
Maybe. I guess I wouldn't put it outside the realm of possibility, but, that would be a really tough decision. I feel like I'd sort of sell my soul if I were to do that.
Yeah, I hear it. You'd kind of sully yourself. I know. I've thought about that myself. It's like, I don't think I could do that. Well, we've been talking to Andrew Demeter. And once again, for our listeners, you can tell the listeners again where they can find more information about you, Andrew.
Sure. So you can go to youtube.com/ or / Teen Take, TEENTAKE, or your safest bet really is just to Google my name, Andrew Demeter, DEMETER.
Well, Andrew, we so appreciate it, and keep up the great work. Folks, check out his documentaries. This kid took on Nancy Pelosi in the hallowed halls of Congress. He's a freedom fighter. He's a patriot, and we appreciate your time, Andrew. Have a great day and a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, James. It's been my pleasure. Same to you.
All right, bro. We'll talk to you soon. I'm James Clary, sitting in for Nick Reed. Nick Reed's in the morning show, KSGF News Talk Radio. We'll see you tomorrow, folks.